Well, hello everybody. I'm Ted Gardner, and I'm here at the Public Library of Cincinnati and Hamilton County on the 21st of June, 2007, and I'm interviewing Russ Witte, a wonderful World War II veteran, and our camera operator is Dennis Daly of the History Department of the Public Library, one of the best in the country. And we're very, very honored to have Russ with us today. Russ, we have met before, and it's wonderful to get together with you. And where were you born, Russ?
I was born right here in Cincinnati.
On the west side?
Yeah. No, well, not at that time. My father was a civil engineering graduate that stayed on and taught civil engineering at the University of Cincinnati.
Oh, really?
We lived right on McMillan Street on an apartment.
Oh, yeah.
Right across from Hughes High School.
Well, how about that?
Where it is now. It wasn't there then.
Yes, right, right. Well, then, where did you go to elementary school?
Well, I went to kindergarten in Norwood. They had moved out to Norwood by then, and what happened? My mother got pregnant about shortly after I was born, and my dad thought, my goodness, if I'm going to have a bunch of kids, I'm not going to be able to make it on a professor's salary. I better get a real job.
Right.
And so he went to work for a contractor. The first job he did was at Concrete Stadium at Withrow High School.
Oh, yes.
And but then he moved to he moved a couple times. But when I got to be 4 years old, I think my mother wanted to get me out of the house because she put me in kindergarten a year early. And so I went to kindergarten in Norwood. I went to grade school at Carson and Price Hill for a half a year. And then I was in the first grade at Westwood School, and I stayed in there until...
Stayed on there. Where did you go to high school?
Went to Western Hills. We were in the first class that went all the way through Western Hills High School, junior high school and senior high school.
I'll bet you...
Graduated 1934.
How about that? I'll bet you knew John Schiff.
He was in my class.
How about that?
Great buddy of mine.
Oh, isn't that something?
Yeah.
Well, you two guys, I can imagine you two guys together.
Too bad you can't interview him.
I know.
He was in the Navy with you.
Oh, yes. Oh, I knew him very well, and we did a lot of things together through the Navy League and everything, you know. Well, how big a family did you have?
Well, I had two younger sisters.
Two younger sisters. And are they still with us?
Yeah, they're both with us.
How about that?
Yeah.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Well, then after Western Hills, and of course you had great friends there, and a lot of wonderful people came out of Western Hills High.
Yeah.
Yeah, my golly. Anyway, then, so you would have been in the class of what,
1934.
34. Okay, right. And of course, that was right in the depth of the Depression.
Oh, absolutely.
Tell us what it was like.
Well,
those times.
You needed money to go to college, but they had this co-op operation in the engineering department at the University of Cincinnati, and we talked to them, and I could get in there, and they would give you deferred payments so that when you had a job, you could use some of what you earned to pay that back, and that worked well.
Oh, that was a wonderful program.
Yeah.
Yeah, I should say. Well, you started right out in engineering?
Yeah, and I graduated with a civil engineering degree in 1939.
How about that?
And of course, along with that, I took ROTC. That was 5 years, and we went to summer camp at Fort Sheridan, and then got a second lieutenant's commission in the anti-aircraft coast artillery.
Oh my golly, Coast Guard, or
Yeah,
Coast Artillery.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that didn't
trying
last
to shoot down airplanes.
That didn't last very long, did it? After the war started.
You know, then I went to work for a couple years. I worked for a big international construction company called H.K. Ferguson. we were working on a great big plant in Columbus, Ohio, when I got my orders to report on active duty, not with the anti-aircraft coast artillery, but with the Air Force at Chanute Field in Rantoul, Illinois.
Now that was, what was that, 1940?
No, that was in 41. No, yeah, 41.
Before the war started.
Yeah, early in 41.
Before our war started, yeah.
And when I got there, I found out the Chanute Field was where they trained air mechanics. And so they made me a personnel officer in a school squadron where you housed 3,000 students, young men who'd just come from Jefferson Barracks.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them had gotten off of a train and then put right on another train and sent there without any basic training at all.
Wow.
So being a personnel officer for 3,000 youngsters, boy, I didn't like that at all.
Oh,
and shortly after I was there, they put a bulletin board on the officers' bulletin on the officers' bulletin board that officers could take pilot training in grade, which meant that you didn't have to resign your commission.
Sure.
And go through as a cadet. Well, that appealed to me, and mine was one of the first names on that list.
I'll bet.
And so I was, well, you had to have an excellent efficiency rating. You had to be under 25. You had to be under 6'3". You had to pass that 6'4" physical exam. I handled all of that, and so I got into pilot training.
Isn't that great? Now, where was your first training
Well,
site?
the first training was at that Orangeburg. Well, they sent us to Maxwell Field where they assembled all of the people, and then they sent them out to different training fields. And from Maxwell Field, we went to Orangeburg, South Carolina.
My gosh, that must have been Orangeburg, South Carolina in those days must have been a mere dot on the map.
Yeah, it's a very swampy area on the Edisto River.
Gosh.
And but well, you know what primary training is.
Oh yeah.
And in those days, they wanted you to learn to fly by the seat of your pants. They didn't even have an airspeed indicator in the student's cockpit. You
Wow.
just, if the plane was going to stall, they wanted you to feel it.
Yes.
And I guess it was good because I survived.
Well, I should say, and that with your education and your ROTC training and everything, boy, you had some tremendous assets there.
Yeah, it was helpful.
And I'm sure that they obviously they recognized that right away. Well, then from Orangeburg.
Well, then we went to basic at Greenville, Mississippi.
Greenville, Mississippi.
Then advanced at Columbus, Mississippi.
Oh yeah.
And then we got our wings at Columbus.
Oh, I see.
And after we got our wings, they split our class all up and sent us to all different areas.
Sure.
But I was with several of us that went to Greenville, South Carolina, back to South Carolina again. And we were training in B-25s.
B-25. That was a new plane at that time, wasn't it?
Relatively new, but they had just come out with B-25Cs. They flew, I think they were Bs that they flew on that Tokyo raid.
Yes.
And they came out with Cs, which had a little more armament.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a great plane to fly.
That's what everyone has said. In comparison with maybe a 26 and a 24.
Yeah, although later on, when I got back from overseas, I was sent to Eglin Field, which was the Air Force's proving ground,
right,
as a test pilot, and I flew 26s, 24s, 17s, 29s.
My goodness.
A-20s, oh gosh, a whole bunch.
You were really
C-47s. Yeah, that was great duty.
You were checked out.
That was fun duty too.
Sure it was. Well, there you were,
Greenville.
Yeah, Greenville, Mississippi. My goodness sakes. They sure, they sure had some small dinky spots for those training areas.
And the problem at Greenville was they didn't have, there were 3 separate squadrons there, they called them. And one squadron was training to leave, the other one was midway through, and then the final squadron was getting a lot of ground school, learning all about the B-25. We could sit in a B-25 cockpit blindfolded and put our hand on 100 instruments, controls, or something, and knew just where all those things were.
Sure.
And but the trouble was we weren't getting any flying time. We were now the second squadron behind the squadron that was getting ready to go, but they were doing all the flying.
Mm-hmm.
So I asked for a leave to come home because I had accumulated a lot of leave by then. And so the CO said, sure, we're not doing much around here now. Why don't you go on home for a week? I thought maybe I might be able to sneak a ride somewhere on a plane, but that didn't work out. And it took me a day and a half to get to Cincinnati from Greenville on a train. But when
slow train.
When I got there, I no sooner got home than here comes a guy with a telegram for me to report immediately back to the base.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
And back in those days, you didn't use long distance unless somebody died or something. But I thought, man, I got to find out what this is all about. I called the base, and my friend said, boy, Russ, you won't believe what happened to you. They took a guy out of this squadron ahead of us. What happened, his mother had called his congressman and said, Congressman, my son is being trained in B-25s and he's not being properly trained and they're going to send him overseas. I want you to do something about that.
Oh my gosh.
Well, Congressman went to the War Department. What the War Department did about it, they took that guy that day and flew him to California, put him with another B-25 outfit that was going overseas right then.
Oh my gosh.
So now they're short a pilot
Sure.
in his thing. So they put all our names from the 2nd Squadron in a hat. And do you remember Tom Harmon? He was a great football player.
Oh yeah, Michigan.
Yeah, he was in the class behind us. They asked him to pick a name out of the hat. And whose name do they pick but mine?
Russ Witte, Cincinnati.
So I headed on back to the base. Here I'd actually had 3 hours of flying time in a B-25. And now I'm getting ready to go overseas.
My God.
So, talk about somebody not having proper training.
Yeah.
I guess I was it.
Lots of sweat.
So, but anyway, there were 18 planes of us, brand new B-25 planes. And so
now this was the D, right? D model?
the C
model.
model. So we got in those planes and they said, okay guys, you're gonna fly the southern route across the Atlantic, and you got secret orders and you gotta go to Khartoum in the Sudan, and give your orders to the commandant there. He'll give you new orders and you know where you're going. But since you're flying across the Atlantic, we don't want you to take anything but a B-4 bag, which, as you know, is just like a suitcase. Anything you can get in that B-4 bag you can take with you. Anything else you want when you get over there, put it in a trunk locker and we'll ship it to you. So we had to put an APO number on there, and some of our super sleuths there found out where those APO numbers were.
Sure.
There were 5 of us that were going to go to Cairo, and the other 13 were going to go to Karachi, India. So we knew, but we weren't supposed to. But anyway, off we go. We flew that.
Were you able to tell
No.
Couldn't tell your family or anybody?
We didn't dare try that.
Oh gosh, no.
But we knew ourselves.
You knew where you were going.
So anyway, we took off for West Palm Beach, where we were going to take off then on this southern route. they put a lot of stuff in our planes. They had a Sperry regular bomb sight. They had a torpedo sight. They had a torpedo rack. We had a step ladder that we had to use if we got on fields where the mechanic had to do something with the engines. And well, you know, we had a lot of first aid stuff. Well, the first aid stuff, they gave us special parachutes. There was a seat pack, but it had a padded back cushion. And they had taken this cushion and carved it out. They put a machete in there. Then they put a net that you could put over your head and tie around your neck to keep the insects off of you. And they give you some repellent to put on you, stuff to put in water to make it right, a first aid kit and a flashlight, and I mean everything you'd need if you had to go down in the jungle.
Sure.
And some of those crazy guys took all that stuff, put it in a box, and shipped it home as a souvenir.
Oh.
So they flew across there without
any.
And actually, that Tom Harmon I told you about, he went down in the jungle, and of all the guys in his plane, he was the only guy that managed to get back to civilization.
Is that so?
And I just wonder if some of those guys were some of those crazies that shipped all this stuff back home.
Where did that go down? Do you remember where they went?
Where
down?
Tom went down?
Yeah.
It was in Brazil, I think.
Brazil.
Yeah. And
so they hadn't even gotten across the Atlantic.
Oh, no.
My gosh.
But anyway, I'm making this pretty long, but...
Well, so you're on your way to India, huh?
Well, that's what they said. Well, you know, we went to Palm Beach, and then to Puerto Rico, to Trinidad, to Georgetown, British Guiana, Belém, and Natal in Brazil. And then from Natal, we hopped across to this little pile of cinders out there in the Atlantic, Ascension Island.
Oh, my golly.
And then from Ascension Island over to Accra. And then from Accra, we had to skirt some French area because they didn't know how friendly they were. We flew in over Lagos.
Now, this was 1942?
This was 43.
43.
Well, actually, we left in 42.
Yeah.
But, well, Christmas and New Year's happened while we were making this cruise.
Yeah, right.
And anyway, we got to Lagos, and then, let's see, Maiduguri and El Fasher. Finally, we got to Khartoum. Through all these packets of special orders on the commandant's desk, well, I think what his clerk did was open up one. He saw that this crew was going to Cairo, so they just took the names off the envelopes, and everybody went to Cairo, wrote new orders, and so we didn't go to India. We went to Cairo, and up there, boy, that was something. General Brereton, who was head of the 9th Air Force, boy, he was delighted. He thought he was getting 5 crews. Here he got, well, by that time it was 16.
Wow.
And we lost 2 of them on the way over there.
Oh.
And anyway, we got there to a sub-depot that the U.S. Air Force ran at a town called Devaswar, which is right near Ismailia. It's right on Great Bitters Lakes, which is one of the lakes that the Suez Canal runs through as it runs south of the Red Sea. And while we were there, a crew landed in a beat-up old B-25. We never saw anything. All the paint had been like you'd sandpapered it off, but it had been knocked off of there by picking up sand with the props and blowing it against the fuselage and the bottom of the wings. The fuselage had a bunch of flak holes in it, I guess they were, or bullet holes, but they were patched with little pieces cut out of tin cans. And we thought, man, what a raunchy looking airplane. And then the guys got out of the plane, and oh my gosh, they were covered with, they had dust in their eyebrows their eyelashes, their hair, their clothes. If they went like this, their clothes
Just clouds of stuff.
just clouds of dust.
My God.
And we thought, man, oh man, I wonder where these guys came from.
Right.
And so we got talking to them. They said they came from the 12th Bomb Group, which was attached to the British 8th Army. And they were flying with the British, pushing Rommel across the desert. And they had started a couple months before that, or a month and a half, whatever it was, before that, at the Battle of El Alamein, when Montgomery turned things around, and the British started winning the ground war.
Started pushing them back.
And the British taught them how to fly their missions, and they did everything the way the British had done with their planes, and they had some of our A-20s, and they were using them. But anyway, we thought, boy, oh boy, I hope that's not where we're going with. The crummy guys are. One thing they had in that plane, they'd pulled the blister out of the back of the plane, and they mounted a 30 caliber machine gun on a Jeep spring back in that little opening where that blister came out. And we said, well, how does that work? And they said, well, we give the top turret gunner a button that he can push, and that sets this thing off. And we load this 30 caliber thing solid with tracer bullets. Usually, you know, there are maybe 7 or 8, 10 tracer bullets to regular bullets, but this was solid tracers. And of course, when the guy hit that button and that thing started, why, it would just bounce all over the place and just fill the air with tracer bullets.
Wow.
And he said, boy, it really worked. I mean, a German fighter would come in from the rear where they were very vulnerable. The top turret gunner couldn't get it, neither could the bomb turret. There was a funnel back there, but this thing filled the funnel.
Isn't that something?
And he said, this is something they just rigged up out there on the field. And
my gosh.
but anyway, to make a long story short, our order said that's where we went to join these guys.
Now, how long were you in Egypt?
Well, not too long. We got really right over into Libya. They had moved up some from where they were at El Alamein. They were based right at that time at a little town called Gamboo, just about 30 miles south of Tobruk.
Oh yeah.
And then we moved frequently to keep up and to be close as we could to the bomb line.
Well, you know, those days, Russ, were so fragile and so tremulous because we hadn't done very much up until that point.
This was really El Alamein was a turn.
This was desperate time.
Yeah.
Did you get into Cairo at all? Did you get to Old Shepherd's Hotel or anything like that?
Sat in one of those big wicker chairs in
How about that?
Shepherd's Hotel. Yeah.
Boy, oh boy, you're a history piece.
Yeah, well, while we were still there in Deviswar, they didn't know what to do with us, and so we were there about a week. Well, we got permission, and you could hop a ride here, so we went to Heliopolis, and then got into Cairo, and got to ride a camel around the Sphinx and those 3 pyramids. And yeah, we saw a little of Egypt.
Did you ever know a man here in town by the name of John March?
No.
John March. He and his family had that Cincinnati Shaper company over on the west side. And I think they lived in Sailor Park at that time. Well, the reason I ask is that he was in Egypt also in the Air Force. Well, anyway, so there you are, and you're working your way west again across the desert.
That's right. Yeah.
And you were pushing Rommel and the Nazis back, and the Africa Corps.
Yeah. They took all our crew and split them up, and they took their crews that were there and split them up, and guys that had been co-pilots and had been flying on missions now became first pilots. We became co-pilots.
I see.
And the way we were issued British uniforms, although we put American insignia on them.
Right.
And we were living in British tents.
Mm-hmm.
Those tents they called EPIP tents. What was it? Egypt, Palestine, personnel tent. I don't know.
India?
Yeah, Egypt, Palestine, Indian personnel tent. Yeah. And they had a footprint about 12 feet square.
Uh-huh.
And we slept, the whole 5-man crew, the two gunners, the bombardier, and the 2 pilots, all slept in one of those EPIP tents.
How about that?
And we slept on canvas cots, and it's a little crowded with 5 cots in one of those little tents.
How did you deal with the sand and the dust?
Well, what we did, at least what I did with my crew, we dug down into the ground, about 8 inches, 6, 8 inches, and with that dirt, we put them in sandbags or filled up 5-gallon gasoline tins, which is how we got all our gasoline, and so we had just scads of them.
Sure.
And we built those up around that 12-foot square thing and pitched our tent on top of that, because this EPI tent only had a 12-inch side on it, and so there wasn't room enough to get up to it, next to it with your cot. But if you dug it down and then put enough of this stuff around the edge, you could put your tent a lot higher, and you'd get maybe 4 feet there. Mm-hmm. And that would let you put your cot right up to the edge of the tent, and so you were a little more comfortable. But that EPI tent was a great tent for the desert, because it was a regular tent formation, but it had another great big canvas cover that covered the tent, and the air would blow through there. And keep it a little much cooler than those old pyramidal tents.
Sure. What rank were you at this time?
I was still a lieutenant.
Still a lieutenant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I got to be a first lieutenant before I came home, but there, and there wasn't much room for promotion unless some of the higher-ranking guys got killed. But usually they didn't go on missions where they expected to get killed.
Did you ever see General Breton?
Yeah, he came out and talked to us once or twice.
Yeah, I've read about him.
Yeah, saw General Conningham, who was vice something or other. He was a guy that handled all the air war that was worked in conjunction with the British 8th Army. He and Montgomery had tents right next to each other, and they worked right together.
How about that?
And he had as much voice in what they did as Montgomery did.
Sure.
And so we were really well coordinated with the Army. And
that's very interesting.
I think that's the first time that ever happened, and that's one of the reasons that Montgomery's 8th Army was so successful.
Yeah, because that was a tremendous thing to turn around that Africa Corps.
Yeah,
and Rommel.
When Montgomery was on Sicily and was going to invade the toe of Italy, he said in a briefing for that invasion, one of our liaison people was in on that briefing, and he said that what we're doing now is what we've done all the way across the desert and into North Africa. He says we get control of the air and control and try to keep the enemy from getting supplies. And then when we know we've got that control, we have a very simple plan with simple alternatives, and we follow through on it.
How about that? Now you're in the B-25. Was this low-level bombing or high-level? Or?
No, we never did any low-level bombing at all. Yeah. We bombed at anywhere from 7,000 to 12,000 feet. Oh,
I see.
And we varied that so that they didn't know what altitude we would be. So when they set their timers on it for flak, they didn't know exactly how high we were.
Well, I wondered if you'd had any training in skip bombing or anything like that.
No, we didn't. We had those torpedo bomb sights and torpedo racks, but they took them out of the plane there at Deviswar, and we never saw them again.
Now, you had a Sperry bomb sight?
Yeah. And that was very good. They did well with that.
Right.
Yeah, our
right.
bombardiers did good. And we would fly in what we called a box, 6 planes with a leader and a man on each of his wings, and then a second element with a guy right behind and under him, and then a man on his wing. And that box was pretty maneuverable then.
Sure.
And all the while we were over enemy territory, we were gaining altitude, losing altitude, and always evasive action.
Really formation flying.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was fun. Formation flying is fun.
Yes.
Except when they're shooting at you.
Sure. And that flak, that was terrible.
Oh, yeah.
Flak
It really was.
People don't really understand what flak was like. You know, they don't know what it means really.
And their fighters were well trained.
Oh yes.
They knew what they were doing.
Oh yeah. Well, they'd had so much experience.
Oh boy.
Goodness sakes.
I remember one mission we were flying, and we had 3 boxes of us, and the boxes flew in formations like that too. But we were in the right box, and I was leading this second element, and so I'm looking up at this guy all the time, and so I'm looking up there, and boy, way up, about 1 o'clock high, I see this German fighter peel off. He peels off, he's coming right at us. And this was a fighter with a 20 millimeter cannon in the nose, I guess, and then he had some machine guns in his wings, and all of that was firing. That guy came straight at us, and I thought, well, Russ, goodbye, baby, this is it. And he flew right between this guy I'm flying on. Man, there wasn't 50 feet in there.
Wow.
He flew right between us. And we're firing at him the whole time he's coming.
Sure.
I mean, all of the machine guns in the noses of our plane were firing at that guy, and we were firing at him. I don't know whether he got hit. We didn't get hit.
Isn't it?
But I thought, sure, we're goners.
Absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
My goodness.
Gee,
That was a fairly restricted area of fire and everything.
Yeah.
Well, working across the desert, how far west did you go?
Well, actually, we got as far as about Tripoli,
Okay.
and they were having difficulty. The Americans had made their landings, you know, in North Africa, just about the time of Al Alamein.
Sure.
And
November '42.
yeah, well, they were both in November.
Yeah.
And anyway, they were moving across from west to east. We were coming from east to west, but they started having some problems, and they thought maybe if they shifted some of their air support to the American side, it would help. So they split 2 of our squadrons, they split them about in half. They sent 13 planes and crews from 2 of our squadrons around the Germans up into the Atlas Mountains.
Oh yeah.
And I was in that group that went over there.
You flew over the Atlas, huh?
Yeah.
Wow.
And we found our airfield. Boy, we didn't have any maps or anything. It's a wonder we ever found where we were supposed to go, because they had few maps
Right.
or anything to give us to fly by.
Yeah.
But we had to stop about 3 times on the way at different airfields, and we managed that, and we got over there. And the first missions we flew from that new base over there were at that battle of well, it was Kasserine Pass.
Kasserine
I think
Pass, sure.
You've heard of Kasserine Pass.
Yes, I should say terrible.
And the weather was just terribly bad at that time. And I remember we were above this cloud cover, and we tried to bomb it one time, and we couldn't even see the ground. And then we had to find our way down through that overcast, and there are mountains sticking up into it.
Sure.
And the only way you could be sure of getting down without running into one of those hard clouds was to go find a hole and dive down through that hole. So we split up and individually found our way back. And then we went out in the afternoon, and fortunately the clouds opened up right over that Kasserine Pass target that it was unbelievable, and we could see German fighters underneath the clouds coming around, but they wouldn't come up through for fear they couldn't get back down.
Sure.
So we were free of fighters and free of flak on that trip.
Right. Oh, that was...
And we bombed something there at Kasserine Pass and hit the target. That was amazing.
Well, you were never shot down then, were you?
No, I was shot up pretty bad. I brought one plane in with all the engine instruments just dangling, and
really,
and one engine gone, and the other engine wasn't doing very well. And I managed to get to our field. I managed to get on the field, and then that other engine quit, and I just coasted it off to the side so that the other guys could land.
Right.
Yeah, that was
so
close.
You walked away from it.
I sure did.
Boy, you were lucky. That was really something. Well, now were you in 25s all the time you were over there?
Yeah.
Now, did you fly over Sicily and Italy?
Yeah. At the end of that war in North Africa, one of the things we were doing was dropping a lot of leaflets.
Oh yeah, propaganda.
Propaganda. In fact, I got a whole bunch of them there if you want to see some and maybe make some copies of them. And we dropped those leaflets suggesting to the soldiers that bring this leaflet and we'll take you prisoner and you'll save your life.
Sure.
And anyway, we were on one of those missions, dropping those darn leaflets, and they were shooting the heck out of us. And one of the guys in our got hit badly by some flak, and he going down like a rocket, and he told everybody to get out, but of course the pilot's got to be the last one out.
Yeah.
And by the time everybody else was out, he was so far down, although he had fought that thing enough so that everybody was able to get out. The only thing he could do is pull that canopy, and the canopy goes, and then he went after it. You never wanted to do that because there's radio antenna and stuff.
You could get hung
there.
up, couldn't you?
And he went to pull you pull it with your left hand, and there's a ring there. He went to pull it, and nothing happened. He looked down. You pull it with your right arm. He went to pull it with your right arm. Looked down. He had no right arm. And so he took his left hand and he pushed it out, and the canopy broke open. And just as it broke open, he hit the ground, and he broke his legs in about 3 or 4 different places. And here he is laying there, blood spurting out of his arm. And but fortunately, he landed right in a whole bunch of Germans, and there was a German first aid people there.
Yeah.
And they put a tourniquet on what was left of his arm, and of course he couldn't walk. They put him on a stretcher and took him to a hospital in Tunis. And the war was over about a week after that, and some of our guys were just nosing around in Tunis. And here they got into a hospital just for the heck of it, and here he is, all propped up in a bed with his legs in casts and wires running from his leg over pulleys with weights on them, and
wow!
And they had really taken care of him.
Well, isn't that something? And he survived.
He survived.
Gosh.
Yeah, we never saw anything more of him because
no.
But yeah, that was amazing.
that was miraculous.
Yeah,
just imagine hitting the ground like that.
Yeah, and if this had been away and nobody around him, but he landed right where there were some people that could give him help.
Well, that's really it's just miraculous, and this is what, all through the war, all these wonderful stories about people that did make it and did
Yeah,
survive,
right.
and you know, of course, the tragedy of those that we lost. Well, how far did you get up into Italy and operate out of Italy?
No, never.
Never got into it.
Quite got that far.
Yeah.
We softened up Sicily, and then they invaded Sicily.
Right.
Then we moved on to Sicily, and we were bombing Italy in preparation.
Sure.
The last mission I was on was in support of getting ready for the invasion at Salerno.
Oh.
And boy, I tell you, when we got there, they said, well, you guys fly 25 missions and then we'll send you back to the States. Great, we'll do that. And but we got to 25 and they said, look, we don't have any replacements for you guys. You got to fly 5 more. Well, okay, 5 more. Well, it kept going 5 more and 5 more and 5 more and 5 more. It got to be up close to 50, and we thought, my God, they're bound to stop it at 50.
Of course.
And we'd already lost about half of the guys we came over there with.
Oh, your luck's going to run out.
And you know, you think this next mission that's going to have my name on it. And but they said you got to do 55. Well, then at 55,
Good.
when guys got to 55, why they cut off their missions and let them spend their time slow timing new engines and,
Sure.
and stuff like
Sure.
that.
So how many missions did you have?
I got 55.
You got 55 missions? Oh my goodness. Talk about good fortune.
Oh, you can
Man,
say
you
that
had
again.
you had the power watching over you.
Yeah, you bet. Boy, I tell you, I was flying one mission one time where I was in that same position where I was flying behind the leader.
Right.
And I had a guy on my right wing, and this was a big target, and we had 3 boxes. That's 18 planes, a lead box and 2 boxes, and we were in this box on the right. And the guy flying on my right wing was a real good friend of mine. Oh, he was a great guy. He's one of these guys that even out there in the desert, he never seemed to get dust all over him like we did. He's one of these guys that if he walked through a coal bin in a white suit, he wouldn't get any coal dust on him. But he was just real nice. You know, he didn't. Well, couldn't see how he could do that. But anyway, he was flying on my right wing. We got into some terrible flak. And I heard this thump on my right. Of course, I'm following this guy above me. And I glanced over there, and a piece of a flak shell had gone off right beside the cockpit, wiped the whole fuselage off there. He was still sitting in the plane. All his clothing was gone from that side. His left arm was missing, but it looked like he was going to keep on flying. But you know, that was a glance like that, and the next time I looked, the plane was gone, and our top turret gunner said, well, I saw 2 parachutes, but one of them was on fire.
Oh my goodness.
And so maybe one guy got out of there.
Yeah.
And golly, and we got back to the base. Whenever we flew on any mission, the intelligence people had a one-on-one interview with
Debriefing.
every debriefing of every crewman
Sure.
on every ship.
Yeah.
And as soon as I got done with that debriefing, I went over to Paul's tent because I knew Paul had a fork and a knife on his mess kit.
Uh-huh.
All I had left was a spoon, so I got Paul's fork and knife. So that shows you how callous you get.
Oh my
up there
God,
on
I
that.
know.
But
Yeah, well, you know, and it does sound callous, but it's also survival, and it was so important. If you didn't do that, your luck was going to run out some way or another.
Oh.
Well, where did you finally wind up your 55th mission?
well, it was on that. We were based right near. We were right at the base of Mount Etna, right near Catania.
Oh yeah.
And so we flew up one of our landmarks. These were night missions,
Oh.
And we were bombing this road crossing, and a creek or something was there, maybe a bridge, right near Salerno, and we were trying to keep the Germans from getting stuff into Salerno because they had just made a landing there.
Right.
And we were successful. And then they said, well, 55, Russ, that's enough. And so
You agreed with that.
I agreed with that. Boy, I tell you, one mission, I had a new co-pilot, and we were flying, had just crossed over what I thought was the bomb line.
Right.
That's where you don't dare drop your bombs for fear you hit your own people.
Sure.
And we got over the bomb line, and I told my co-pilot, who was flying over there, is that I'll take over. Well, I had slid my seat back because we were flying on the right wing of a leader, and so he could see across there. My seat was slid back, so I said, I slid my seat over. I hadn't even locked in place hardly, and blam, something hit us. We found out later it was an 88 millimeter shell.
Wow.
Came right up through the fuselage, right through the pilot's floor, right behind where my seat was then, but right where my seat had been, right out through the canopy.
Oh my gosh.
And the amazing thing is, these are 88 millimeter shells. They're supposed to go off when they hit something.
Yeah, contact.
That didn't. And they're supposed to go off when, they're timed to go off when they're at your elevation.
Yes.
That didn't happen. And not only that, the floor of the pilot's compartment is full of all kind of wires and controls and cables and stuff that didn't hit any of that stuff.
And those, of course, are vital to the operation of the aircraft.
Yeah.
Good
man.
heavens. Well, you talk
But
about.
boy, I just came so close to being skewered by that
Oh
thing.
my goodness. I should
So,
say. Well, that's just remarkable, Russ.
It's remarkable that I'm here.
And I should say, well, I know a lot of us can say that too. By the grace of God and whatever. Were you able to? Did you get V-mail letters from home and things like that, or?
Well, yeah, I did. And I got letters from my parents. We never did those planes of us, which were there were 12 of us, that never did get our trunk locker. So all we had in the way of uniforms was what we had in our B4 bag.
Well, for heaven's sake.
And so we were kind of handicapped for clothes, and it was so cold on that desert. Oh man, at night the sun would go down and it would get cold, and this was wintertime, and it would be freezing before morning.
Amazing.
And so, we were expecting to be kind of in tropical places. We didn't take a lot of warm stuff along.
Then it would get warm in the daytime, though, wouldn't it?
Oh yeah. In fact, in the summertime, it got up. I remember one time it got up to 145 on one thermometer, 140 on the other.
Good.
You couldn't touch anything metal.
No.
And you could see why those Arabs go around with that stuff hanging down around their neck.
Protection. Sure.
Yeah.
Did you have contact with Arabs or Bedouins or?
Well, they wandered through.
Yeah.
But they gave us. The British gave us what they call blood chits. It was a little piece of paper, and I've got one to give you if you'd like to have one.
Wonderful.
And it said in Arabic, "Greetings to you. The man bearing this is an officer in the British Army. Treat him well. Feed him. Give him water, and take him to the nearest British outfit that you know about, and you'll be rewarded."
Aha.
Well, the Germans also gave rewards, and these guys knew who gave
the most.
most reward.
Money.
But on this thing, it had instructions about don't look at their women. If you get there, don't fill your canteen out of their water supply. Go to the well, and a lot of stuff like that. That was.
Yeah,
That
the
was great.
protocol was pretty stiff, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
I should say.
No.
Well, my goodness, your vast experience with people of all kinds is just amazing how how you did all that. Well, then, so there you were, and your 55th mission. You said so long to Italy.
Well, we didn't have orders, and we were waiting for orders. But as soon as I got my 55 mission, well, there was a general in the headquarters unit, which was based not too far from us, that had a B-25 that was his own personal plane, and his pilot got sick, so they sent me over there to fly. I think his name was Cannon, General Cannon. They asked me to fly General Cannon around, which I did. We flew to Tripoli and to Algeria. I mean, we flew all over the place where he had to see people to
Sure.
get something worked out.
Sure, sure. Well, that North Africa, it must have been very fascinating, even with all the discomfort and everything.
Oh, I tell you, that Libyan desert is a great place to fight a war. You can't do anything to that place to make it worse than it was.
I know.
I mean, if you want to fight a war, go over there and fight it, because you can't hurt anything. And those Arabs, they loved it. I mean, you'd see their camels going by. They had jerry cans hanging on there. They all had Mauser rifles and Luger pistols.
Gosh.
And yeah, I think they loved the war.
They were living pretty fast.
The only trouble was that Germans, before they left the place, if they had time, they would put mines all over the place.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, these
Poor
Arabs, they weren't any more able to tell where those mines were than we were without a mine detector.
Oh, I should say. Well, so there you were, and you were flying that general around.
Well, that only lasted maybe a week or two.
Oh, I see.
And my orders came in. I heard they said, "Come on back. We got your orders." And there were about 11 of us, I think, we had orders to go to a rest area near Fez, Morocco, that was run by the Red Cross, and go there and rest, and we would get our orders from there. And we thought, well, boy, I hope they don't keep us over here with mats or something, flying C-47s and flying stuff around. We wanted to go home, and we sweated out those orders, and they did come after about a week and said, go home.
How about
Any way you can get home. But these orders had priorities, as we found out, because we went right to Casablanca and mailed all our souvenirs and stuff home so we could get our B-4 bag down under 55 pounds, because if you flew home on any kind of Army or Navy plane, you had to be under 55 pounds with your luggage. So, boy, I shipped home a Mauser rifle and a Luger and a whole bunch of great stuff that I had collected. I mailed it home, but it never got there.
Never got here.
So you know how good that mail was from Casablanca.
Somebody intercepted that right away.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
All those great souvenirs.
Oh gosh, I know. That's heartbreaking too.
But anyway, we looked around there. We went to Marrakech. We went to Port Lyoté, where the Navy was flying. And we got our name on a manifest, and then we'd go back to check on it, and we'd been bumped. And we weren't going to go on that flight. And we found out later that we were being bumped frequently by German officers that they were sending to the States as prisoners.
Oh, for
And
heaven's
boy, we were really PO'd about that.
Oh my gosh.
But finally, we heard that there was a small liner leaving Casablanca, heading for the States. And boy, we dashed down there to the dock, and we were the last few people that got onto this thing. It was a little ship, but it was pretty fast, I guess, because it it was going to go back without any escort.
No
or
escort
anything.
whatsoever.
And this was in '43 when the submarines were
sure.
really active in the Atlantic. And we got on that ship. We were on board there with a whole bunch of injured soldiers and airmen, and there were some Frenchmen on there, some young French fellas that were going to the States to be trained as aviators, and there were some pregnant whacks on that ship. And anyway, they asked us airmen if we would mind standing watch. They had a crow's nest fore and aft on this ship, if we'd mind standing watch for submarine lookout duty. And we've all volunteered for that. And but this little ship, it was named the Empress of Scotland.
Oh, yes.
But it had been the Empress of Japan. And it was one of the tour ships that took people from Vancouver to Anchorage, Alaska, or something like that.
Right.
But they had taken that ship and filled it with cots that, well, there were three cots deep and 18 inches apart. And it was crowded, and we were all issued life vests, and we had or life, or whatever you call them, and we had to keep those with us all the time. And we did serve lookout duty. We were on 4 hours and then off 12, and that went on all the way across there, except that there were 2 or 3 days there we got into the worst darn storm that I've ever seen.
What time of the year was this?
This was in September, October.
Okay.
It was in October.
Yeah.
And October of '43. And honest to goodness, I'd never been on the ocean before in a ship. I didn't know much about that kind of sailing. And this little thing would climb up this great big wave. And of course, the wind's blowing right straight at you. They had to go at the wind. It would hardly make it over the top. It'd go zooming down the other side into the next wave, clear up to the conning tower, and then it'd shake and shake and shake and finally come up out of there, just make it over the next wave. And it just kept doing that over and over again. And of course, it was raining and blowing, and oh man, it was terrible. The only people that showed up for mess were the airmen and the permanent personnel.
Right.
Everybody else was hung over something somewhere.
Sure, terrible seasickness. And oh my goodness. Well, then you came back to New York?
No, we came back to Newport News.
Oh, Newport News. 2 minutes? All right.
Well, 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Well, let me close it up then.
Okay, fine. Give us a good one.
We came into Newport, the 8th day we were on the ship, we woke up, and here we were standing offshore, for which we were very thankful, waiting for a pilot to come and lead us in.
Right.
And we docked, and there was a band there for us, greeting us with a band. Well, anyway, we went from there. They put us on trains that were just hitting town after town after town, and we got on one that was hitting Cincinnati. There were 3 of us. One of the guys was in my squadron, and we got off in Cincinnati. Were greeted by the press and cameras and stuff, and so we were
Union
home.
Terminal, huh? At Union Terminal.
Union Terminal. Oh yeah, man, that was a crowded place. And then we had a little leave at home, and then we went to Atlantic City to be redistributed and get straight with IRS, who had been billing us all this time.
Sure.
And and get a new assignment. And I had some friends that already were stationed as test pilots at Eglin Field, Florida. And they said, "Get this, Russ, it's good duty." So I asked for it, and I think since I had a engineering degree, they thought that would be helpful for a test pilot. So they sent me down there. I was put in a heavy bomb group and flew heavy bombers mostly, but got to fly any plane I wanted to fly, but I made it a point not to fly planes unless I had some reason to have to fly.
Yes. Well, Russ, you've had a remarkable experience, and we're so thankful that you're here to be able to tell us about it. And so you weren't sent back overseas afterwards. You didn't go back.
No, but I thought we would be until they dropped those bombs.
Yes, well, we were all thinking about
Yeah.
that, having to go to Japan.
Yeah.
Well, it's just wonderful to have the opportunity to talk to you, and you're in great shape and great health, and able to play golf. And I understand you're a swimmer.
Yeah.
Yeah. And your wife is with you, and
Yes.
isn't that great? She was a Cincinnati girl.
Well, actually, she grew up across the river in Fort Thomas.
Okay,
But
that's close
I
enough.
tell everybody she put on some shoes and came to Cincinnati.
Well, listen, I want to thank you so
Okay.
much. It's just been an honor and a pleasure. God bless you, and you'll see the results of our interview, and
Okay.
I hope you and your family enjoy
It
it.
was great.